maybe you're just on your couch sitting there wondering what to do, or just sitting there thinking about your next movie to watch. Maybe you're just sitting there thinking to yourself, okay, what am I going to eat next week, or how am I going to prepare this or that? Maybe you're feeling a lot of stress, and you decide you want to start a podcast to alleviate some of that stress. Now you're wondering, well, what do I do with the podcast now that I've actually started it? Well, see, starting a podcast is something that a lot of people usually don't think about. And those who do leave themselves wondering, how do I get to the top of the charts? The first thing to remember is that you're not alone in this process. Even I want to try and get to the top of the charts. But maybe starting small is something to consider doing first. For starters, you need to understand the numbers. The numbers are just, well, numbers. And the numbers have a lot of weight when you think about how popular your show will get. But you have to also keep in mind, every number that is low is also, there's also another number out of what the total number of podcast listeners in the world is that still hasn't listened to your show. And so that's a lot of untapped audience. When you think about 6,000 compared to 7.6 billion people, you think, oh goodness, that's a very small number. How am I ever going to climb this mountain? Without ever realizing that the mountain that you have left to climb, they haven't listened to your show yet. So if you can get just enough of them to listen to your show, then you're probably going to grow exponentially. In today's episode, I'm going to be teaching you guys how to do just that. Creating a successful show really isn't something that you should take lightly, nor should you take seriously when you fail. It's something like a joke, basically, but not like the joke kind of joke where you're laughing at yourself or other people. It's more like a joke in the sense that it's meant to be whimsical and a funny experience, as well as a fun experience. And sometimes when those experiences fail, we begin to get crushed and doubt ourselves. But remember, don't doubt yourself. This is going to cause you to sink even lower, and in some cases make irrational decisions. Now, to climb to the top, the only thing you have to really do is know how to make good content. And you don't necessarily have to get everybody in the world to enjoy it. You just have to get enough people, maybe 1,000, for example. And of those 1,000 people, for example, you might want to get a listener base of 400 people. So you focus on the 1,000 people as a whole, what their demographic is like, what they like to listen to, and then of those 1,000 people, you work with them and also focus on concentrating on getting 400 people of that 1,000 to actually stick around. If you can get the people to stick around and then they tell their friends about it, then eventually you start to pick up more people. And you just keep chomping away at the sandwich until you've basically, well, this is obvious, you've eaten the whole sandwich. And then, well, if you want to eat more sandwiches, you eat more. And don't get full, because, you might throw up. And that would be bad. Now, getting plays it's really just a matter of time, effort, and maybe a little bit of money, depending on how you want to look at it. You should always invest in the right equipment. And even if you don't have the right equipment right away, something like your phone, like I'm recording on right now, might actually work for you. You might be able to use your headphones, and if you have a gaming headset like I do, maybe even a headset. And in case you guys are wondering, I'm actually sitting in here recording it in an enclosed space, which so happens to be the bathroom. But don't worry, I am not doing anything. I'm not doing anything in here. I'm just sitting here, just calmly sitting where the floor is in an enclosed space, because the background noise of the other rooms on my phone is really loud. And that's another thing. Try and find a room or space where you won't be interrupted and where you can record with ease and make your content without being disrupted. Now, you can also, if you're on Anchor, add flags. And what flags will do is it will allow you to go back in and edit at certain points in your recording. Of course, the add flags feature being a phone feature on the app, so make sure you have the app handy. And it also helps to record with other people. Maybe you have some co-hosts or some friends who want to join along for the ride. And in my case, when I got my co-host on board, it was the greatest thing that ever happened. When my friend actually uploaded one of her solo shows to the podcast, it actually got over 123 plays, and so I was really excited for her. But I was also excited for the show as well, because being excited for the show because that actually helped us increase our numbers as a whole, and it proved that having additional voices added to the show can actually help your show in the long run. It also gives you different perspectives. Like my co-host Reese, for example, who's in the LGBTQ community, actually adds an LGBTQ perspective. And my perspective as a Christian and a really hard-working go-getter and a passion for acceptance and everything podcasting actually offers a core perspective. Meanwhile, my co-host Sierra's perspective, being that she's a girl, actually offers a female perspective. Because, having a female voice that females can relate to can often attract female audiences. And in some cases, this can be key, but not always. It just depends on your show and who your targeting demographic is. And then you also have to look at the content itself. What are you actually going to be talking about? Talking about certain things really depends on what those things are. If you're talking about politics and you want to be specific about politics, but you don't want to alienate either party or multi-parties if you're from Britain or Australia, then, well, you need to find a way to make those podcasts as unbiased as possible. Like CNN or PBS NewsHour, for example, as their podcasts are unbiased as they look at it from both Republican, Democrat, Liberal, or Conservative Party examples, or Labor Party examples as well, and it actually gives you multiple perspectives from all angles. Now, if you guys want to be specific and be polarizing, you could focus on one party, but then you'd risk alienating the other half of your audience, which might not be of the same party. Those are politics podcasts, for example. There are many other examples, like religious podcasts. You want to look at things from a religious standpoint, then of course you're going to alienate some people, but you still want to be inclusive and not bash another religion, because that will turn off your audience. Oh, did I mention, if you say anything or do anything that might be offensive to a certain particular group of people, then you might turn off that part of your audience. Be careful of this. Also vet who you have on your shows, because if they say it, then that reflects poorly on you as well. And that's not something that you want to happen. And then there's always the issue of ads and monetization. Well, if you have so many ads in your episodes, you're not very strategic with it. Yes, you might make a lot of money, but you might turn off your audience because of ads. Another rule of thumb is please refrain from using ads. And I know I shouldn't word it this way, but it's the truth. You really shouldn't use ads if you don't have a big listener base. Or if you do use ads, use them mid-roll or put them as close to the end as possible. And the reasoning for this is because if you are a very young podcast, people really just want to hear your voice. And as crazy as that sounds, I speak from experience. People really just want to hear your voice. They want to hear what you have to say. If they're hearing a bunch of businesses or even you talking about a business for like 60 seconds and not really hearing any content, they're just going to turn away. And they're probably not going to come back. And if they do come back and you do it again, well then that's going to reflect negatively again. Now the hard truth to growing. Growing does last a long time, but with personal lives and with retirement for some, or with college for some, it doesn't always last forever. So having a game plan in place, maybe you have a younger co-host that wants to take over the podcast when you're finished with it. Or maybe you have plans to grow after college in your podcast and you end up with a full-time job. Well, then having a plan in place ahead of time to figure out how you can continue to grow and how you can continue to create content is actually a good idea. As with what happened with my friend Oddlife, who's a YouTuber, he decided to step away from YouTube altogether. And he decided to step away because his personal life and some personal issues were getting in the way of his free time to record. And I only know this because he actually has said as much, that doing YouTube is a challenge to balance that out with personal life, especially when you're in your 20s and 30s. And not to mention your late 20s at that. That's a especially turbulent time. Growing is also dependent on how well you convey your content, like your articulation, your speech, for example. I might stammer every now and then, but when I do my podcast episodes, I try and slow to a crawl, but not extremely low. And I also try and script my podcast where I can, except for this episode that I'm recording on the fly. And I actually try and read from the script. And actually, having a script can help you. If you're like me and you have vocal problems when it comes to speech, if you talk too fast or don't have anything to read off of, like just then, that was an example. You guys get my drift here. You guys might need something like a script, or maybe like a prompter or something to help tell you what you need to say, when you need to say it, that sort of thing. And even a timer, probably, because having a timer and setting it for a larger amount of time than what your recording actually is, forces your head to think, okay, I have 40 minutes. Even though the episode is only going to be 30, you have 40 minutes on the timer. Psychologically, that forces your brain to think slower. And I'm not a psychologist, but that's something that I've observed. Having timers longer or setting clocks backwards instead of setting them forwards actually causes you to think, okay, you have to take this slower because you have more time. That's just how it works. My teachers, when I was in high school, had even said as such, because that's the method they used. They would set the clocks back in the classroom, and that would make the students be forced to sit there longer, in their seats longer, and not try and get up and rush towards the doors so that they can take their time and finish their work. Well, it's the exact same thing here. You want to have that method of conveying your stuff by doing it within a time frame, not rushing it. You want to make sure your speech and everything is perfect. But not too perfect, but it's not going to be perfect every single time, but at least it will be somewhat of a good start. Another thing to consider is making sure that you have a plan in place for, what happens for this season, next season. That's a seasonal thing. And I'm going to cover that more towards the end. The last point I'm going to make before I cover that part is growing is dependent on all of those things, but as long as you have fun with it and you're doing what you love to do, I don't see why you're not going to grow. And that's where what I said earlier about having a plan in place for seasons. Get a theme for each season. Get a theme and set that theme and tailor your episodes towards that theme. Maybe it's gaming, maybe it's news, maybe it's religion, maybe it is something from the past, history, science, whatever. But the key to growing is really finding what you love and doing what you love, but trying your best to do it right. And that is all the time I have for today. If you guys have not already given me a like rating on Spotify or your platform of choice, please consider doing so. I'll leave my information in the description so you guys can reach out to me. As you guys can also send me a message. As always, you guys, I am HJ, not going by Shredder anymore. that was a little bit of a bad term for gaming. That gaming names don't really work in podcasting, as I came to find out. And I will hopefully catch you guys in the next episode.